Welcome to another episode of Women Investing in Women. My co-host Robin and I are absolutely delighted week after week to showcase the voices, messages, and the impact women from different walks of life, different corners of the world are making to make life better, make life impactful, and make life bearable, livable, beautiful for other women, and through that for society itself. And today's conversation is going to be a little difficult, at the same time, very important. So let's take a moment and have Robin introduce our guest today. You are going to be truly and deeply moved by this conversation. Take it away, Robin.
Beautiful. We are thrilled to have Anissa Hudak with us. And as she says, she hails from Kansas, where there are more cows than there are people. We're delighted. I will say we have mixed feelings. We're delighted that she is here, and we're very sad that we need to have her here because she deals in helping women with trauma, women who have had sexual trauma and other types of trauma. She's a neurosomatic therapist and deals specifically with women to not just cope, but to find real healing. And unfortunately, we need her here. And people like her here, unfortunately, but it's true. So my first question usually is, how did you get into this line of work and this work of neurosomatic where you deal with the body, not just your head? What led you into this course of work?
Great question. It started by being a yogi. I loved yoga. And they were offering a teacher training course for the type of yoga that I really enjoyed in my hometown here in Manhattan, Kansas, which is really odd. And I was like, I should take it. I didn't like going to other people's classes. I didn't like being on other people's schedules. And I was like, let me just learn how to keep myself safe on my mat and just do that. I had no aspirations of ever teaching. And about a month after I finished the course, I had 2 job offers to teach yoga. And I said, I think the universe is trying to tell me something. And so I started teaching, and I got the bug, and I started taking more teacher training classes so I could work with other, communities, kids and seniors and what have you. And one of the courses that they were offering was for veterans for PTSD. And I thought, my husband is active duty. We live in a huge active duty and retirement community. And we're at Fort Riley. I should take these courses and bring them back to my community and be of service. It made perfect sense to me. I was about halfway through the first class and I realized, the first person I was going to be working with was me. I didn't realize at that point how PTSD had really crawled into the nooks and crannies of my life and was holding me back in ways I hadn't even noticed. And so that kind of started my own self-recovery. And before I knew it, I became a yoga therapist, over 1,000 hours of teaching and what have you on the mat, learning. And so I was like, okay. And then I was working at Fort Riley with the Warrior Transition Battalion. So I was working with active duty folks who were dealing with all types of illnesses and wounds, whether it was visible or not. And I worked with them for about 3.5 years. And then I also had a private practice here in town where I had folks coming in, and I was working with women who were like me. At that point, I had been sexually assaulted when I was about 18. And so, that was some of what I was dealing with in trying, with my recovery. And I was working with other women who were like me, and we were all saying the same thing. We feel great after class. We're getting this out of our bodies. We are, reconnecting with our bodies, reconnecting our minds with our bodies again, not living from the neck up. We have more bandwidth. We are feeling wonderful. And then we go to talk therapy, and it takes it all away. It was horrible. And I was like, okay, here we are. They could put a man on the moon. Don't we know more about our minds at this point? Can't we do something else other than just talk therapy? Now, talk therapy is great for awareness. However, it's not great at conclusion. So I started doing some research, and I came about a group of techniques that all stand on their own. However, when you put them all together and you interweave them, they become incredibly effective and amazingly gentle for the client, and they are able to be done. They have conclusion. They don't have to, and the beauty of it is they don't even have to talk about it. That's the amazing thing. So it's not about the story. It is about getting this out of the body and getting it out of the unconscious. And so that's kind of how I got to where I'm at. I never woke up one day and said, oh, this is what I want to do. It just kind of happened. And so here I am.
That journey is very powerful. It's self-healing. And I can see how through your own self-healing, you came to the realization that if this can help me, I'm sure there are enough women around me who can benefit from it. And the startling fact is, even in the United States, 20% of women are sexually assaulted before they come of age into adult womanhood. And then once they're adults, it doesn't stop, right? And different states, different communities, the rates are higher. And so we live in a world where men who feel like they're losing power use controlling women or sexually assaulting women as a way to somehow feel masculine, whether it's in war situations, whether in workplace situations, different cultures, different places. As you're working with women, is there a specific area in which you work, or this doesn't matter where the trauma is coming from? You work with women regardless, and how does that work?
Well, I do everything online because I am based here in Manhattan, Kansas, where, as Robin said, the livestock outnumber the people. I will tell you that the cows don't really dig the yoga, but the bison actually like it, funny enough. That being said, I work with women all over the world. And, what I have found is that rape is about sexual assault, incest, molestation. It's all about power, as you said. It is not about the sex. It's never about the sex. It is always about the power. And it is not only men. There are women who are sexually assaulting other women. And because it's all about power, it doesn't matter what the sexes are. It's all about the power. And I am credentialed globally, so I can work with anyone anywhere in the world, which I have. And it was really interesting. Between the time that I became I did all the education for the neuro work and the yogi work, I was actually sexually assaulted again. And I was able to put my clinician hat on and say, okay, what do I need to do to help myself heal? And I was able to go about and do that. However, I was also in a place where I was like, I feel like I'm on the talk therapy hamster wheel. I'm never getting any conclusion. And that's what I really sought out for. I wanted to be done. And so there are great ways out there to be in awareness. However, getting to conclusion is a totally different story. And that's what I would really love for women to start concentrating on is how do you get to the end and be able to move on?
What you're saying is really beautiful and very powerful. And I'm wondering, what is it that prevents women or makes it difficult for them? And I don't like to use the word move on. Um, I like to use the word maybe build scaffolding around it. Although if you're building scaffolding around something, that means it's still there. But what do you think are some of the biggest blocks for women for being able to not just cope, but have healing?
That's a great question. And I think it kind of comes back to our Western medical establishment. We have been taught here in the West that our brains are not connected to our bodies. When you look at the Western medical establishment, you go to a doctor for your heart, you go to a doctor for your liver, you go to a doctor for your mind. Nobody hardly ever looks at the whole body. Maybe your GP, maybe, but they're only looking at the body itself, not the mind. You have a separate doctor for your mind. Everything is very compartmentalized. We're not looking at the entire person. When you're talking about PTSD, PTSD is comprised of over 75 different symptoms. And some of them are physical and some of them are mental health. And it takes someone to look at the entire person to be able to really garner a good diagnosis. Now, we could say, oh, you've been in a car accident and you've got these symptoms. Yeah, you've got PTSD. Like, that's easy to say. But to actually have a formal diagnosis takes someone to take the time to look at the whole person. And I think that that's what's really kind of holding people up with mental health issues is that they're not looking at the whole person. Is your stomach upset? Is your heart racing? Are your palms sweaty? What are the physical things that are happening? Are you finding that you're having trouble hearing? Are you having trouble with your eyes? Are you finding that you're wearing sunglasses more? Like all of these little things that you don't think are big deals are actually symptom sets. And so it really takes somebody to be a Sherlock Holmes and look at the whole person. We don't have anyone in the Western medical establishment who does that. That being said, we also have been conditioned to think talk therapy is the answer. Now, talk therapy is great. However, talk therapy is where you talk from your conscious part of your brain. It brings you into awareness. It's wonderful. However, trauma is actually stored in the unconscious part of your mind. And so your conscious mind, you're only there 5% of your day. Your unconscious, you're there 95% of your day. How can you solve a problem with 5% of your brain? It's not going to happen. You have to go where the trauma lives. The trauma lives in the body and it lives in the unconscious. And the mental health Western establishment hasn't talked about that at all. All they want to do is give you talk therapy and meds. And I don't think women know where to go next. What do I do next? Is this all that I have to do is talk therapy and meds? So I think that that's what the big hiccup is.
So I hear, Anissa, where the yoga and the whole body, the whole being, and the presence and the healing allows you to go where the Western medicine doesn't, because the Eastern tradition tends to look at the whole person in every aspect of the world. I come from the culture that brings yoga and meditation to the world, but we too are not exempt from undergoing trauma, right? So when we are living in a world where trauma comes from sometimes or most of the time from places we know, just the recent story that broke about men around the world visiting a site where there is training for other men on how to sexually assault their wives, their girlfriends, their fiancés. This is almost a sport for men. If 61 million visits one month, 82 million visits another month, and nobody reports, on top of the trauma, the fear of who I can trust, I read this analogy where this woman goes with a box of chocolates and offers it to men. It's chocolate covered almonds and says, have a chocolate. And as the guy tries to take a chocolate, she says, oh, by the way, two of them are poop covered in chocolate. The others are actually almonds. No man wants to try a chocolate. And yet, when a woman has a problem, every man says, not all men. Why don't you take a chocolate then? It's not all chocolates, it's only two. So, what creates the social environment for this to be perpetuated? And sometimes it's the women that are allowing it to happen because it's culturally ingrained. And why are you complaining? It happens to all of us, or it happens to everybody. So, in addition to trauma therapy, that's after the fact. What can we do as a society to prevent it? Because after the horse leaves the barn, it's not the same horse.
Exactly. That's a great, I love that question. It's a great question. So I am the mom of boys. Now, my boys knew that I had sustained a sexual assault. They knew that growing up. I taught them what no means. And I said to them, I don't care if you're in the middle of something. If she all of a sudden says no, the answer is no. You zip up your pants and you walk out. That's it. You're not going to die. You might be unhappy, but you're not going to die. No means no. And my older son came to me one day and said, Mom, I have a problem. And this is going to be very upsetting for you. And this breaks my heart to bring this to you, but I don't know what to do. And I said, well, lay it on me. What do we got? And he said, I was with a girl and I broke it off with her. And now she's claiming I raped her. And I did not. It was consensual. And I said, okay, let's deal with this. Um, it hurt because there was a girl who was crying wolf. I know my kid. I know when he's lying to me. And I knew he wasn't lying. And as it turns out, and this was just pure luck, they were in a car. I mean, they were teenagers, parked somewhere. And a police officer interrupted them. And he, told them to get dressed, pulled them out of the car, spoke to them each one-on-one to make sure that it was in fact consensual. He was happy with the answers, told him to go get a room. I said, okay. I said, so which police department was it? I called and he called me back and came to the house. And we explained the situation. And he said, no. In fact, the girl said she was high and so she couldn't consent. And he said, well, I'm well trained and I can tell you she was not high. And I can tell you that she said it was consensual. And, she was online putting all of this stuff out. And he said, that's cyberbullying. He's like, I will put a stop to it. She wound up being arrested because it escalated and continued, had nothing to do with my son. And, I was really proud of my son for saying, yeah, I did this, but it was consensual. And now I've got a problem with it. Part of me wanted to be like, oh my God, what have you done? And then part of me was like, okay, wait a minute, let's take a beat. The kid was not doing anything wrong. She's utilizing this situation wrong. She's the one with the problem. And so, we've got women who are crying wolf. We have women who have real experiences. In a lot of respects, how does society take us seriously when we have that kind of a situation? And it's a he said, she said. Um, you know, since the dawn of time, women were in power. It took Pope Innocent the 14th to actually make us subservient. And that was in like 1430, I believe. He recognized that if he could control the population, he could control everything. And who creates the population? Women. So if you can control women, you can control the world. And that is when we became, if you will, second-class citizens. So we need to do a lot to get ourselves back on even playing field. So that way, when we do say, hey, that's not right, you can't, say, hey, blow me for a promotion or whatever it is, that's just not acceptable. And there has to be real change, not a slap on the wrist.
Listening to you, it just gives me the chills, listening to everything that you said. And I agree absolutely wholeheartedly. Absolute change is needed. And it's absolutely devastating when a woman cries wolf, because then that imperils everyone else. And so it is really disastrous. And kudos to you for helping your son work through that. And thank goodness that the situation turned out as it did. And maybe that will be a message to other women to not cry wolf. We say this with every single guest, but the time flies by. These are very short podcasts on purpose. And how can the people get a hold of you? Because I know they will absolutely want to know more, especially about your neurosomatic therapy. I love that word, neurosomatic. And how can people get a hold of you? And you have a final golden nugget for us before Cass wraps this up for us.
Yeah. So I'm all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. PhoenixWomenHealing.com is my website. If you go there, there is a 3-minute quiz that you can take that is free for everyone, and you get to find out what your strong survivor pattern is. And we didn't actually get a chance to talk about that. And so go to the website, take your quiz, find out where you are in the pattern. And my last golden nugget is you can have completion.
Thank you for making the time, Anissa, and having this important conversation.
Thank you so
Especially,
much for having me on. This was wonderful. Thank you.
we're going through a time where women are horrified about everything that's going on in the world, everything they're finding out, everything they're realizing could happen to them by the hands of the men they love. This is not a matter of who it could happen to, it's a matter of when it's going to happen to every woman. In different cultures, different societies, it shows up differently. So it's important for us to normalize the conversation, but not normalize the behavior that results in it. And how do we make space for it? How do we invite women not to blame themselves about it? And so I'm glad that you're doing the work you're doing, because God knows the world needs this. And the more and more men feel like they're sidelined, then they're being emasculated, all of those things, the male loneliness, all of that is going to lead to more of this, right? Because this is where tend to get their sense of power from. So we women need to come up with a way to manage ourselves, monitor ourselves, and support one another preventatively. And God forbid if something happens, then know where to go. And for that, we're grateful we're having this conversation. And Robin and I talked before the episode that this is a hard conversation, but a necessary conversation. So to all the women out there, you're raising sons and daughters. Raise them with mindfulness. Have the conversations ahead of time so that we prevent and raise children in a way that prevention is the norm. And this behavior is not normalized, doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. And to the women out there, when something happens, don't blame yourself. Reach out to the resources that can help you, because the intent of the abuser is to sabotage you and keep you crippled, because it is about control. And if the one thing you need to do is take that control away from them, show up in your own power, be in the driver's seat of your life. And there are ways this can be managed, because you're never going to forget it. It happened. And take the time, take the space to heal and lean in with the people who can heal you.